You're listening to The Support Report with Be Present, where we share real stories from young adults and how support changed their lives.
Hey, everybody. Thanks again for tuning into another episode of The Support Report with Be Present. I'm your host, Justin Peters, and I'm here today with Kara Noskoff, who has a ton of experience working with the AYA cancer patient and survivors. She's worked for the Children's Hospital of Orange County as an AYA child life specialist, and also currently works for Teen Cancer America as a hospital programs and services manager. Kara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Justin. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about you and the organizations you are involved with. How about we start things off and just tell us a little bit about Teen Cancer America? What's the organization? What's the mission? A little bit about the history and how it all got started.
Great. Yeah, so Teen Cancer America started, 7 or 8 years ago. And we like to say it's a sister charity to Teen Cancer Trust in the UK. So things were really growing several years ago over in the UK. They were developing adolescent and young adult hospitals. They call them TYAs over there, teens and young adults, and really focusing on that teen and early 20-year-old patient. And so, the issue is there's pediatric hospitals, there's adult hospitals. And so they really put a lot of their focus into creating a space, creating a dedicated hospital for teens and young adults. And during that time, Roger Daltrey from The Who, the rock band, was spending a lot of time there. He was a huge supporter of teens and young adults facing cancer. And during that time, he was also on tour in the US and met up with a friend whose daughter was diagnosed with cancer, and quickly saw that in the US, there wasn't a space for her that was age appropriate. There wasn't, a unit. There weren't dedicated nurses and doctors that were specialized in this age group. And so he went back to the executive director of Teen Cancer Trust, who was Simon Davies at the time. And so there's a big issue in the US and we need to do something about it. They're very advanced in a lot of ways, but this is an area that they're lacking. And he was really passionate about starting something here in America. So, he is our founder, and after a lot of coaxing with Simon Davies and late night calls or early morning calls from the UK, Simon was basically cold calling hospitals here in the US saying, there's this adolescent and young adult population, and what are you doing about it, and how can I support you from here, and here's what we've learned, here's the data, how can we build these programs for young adults. A few years of that went by, and then Simon quickly realized he needed to come over here and kind of be boots on the ground to have these meetings and meet with administration and meet with healthcare providers to have these conversations about changing the way that we care for this age group. And so he came over from the UK and landed himself in LA, and that's when they started Teen Cancer America.
So this is a topic that we've explored a little bit already on the podcast. But first of all, for people who might be tuning into their first podcast, can you give the demographics whenever you talk about adolescents or teens and young adults? What's that age frame?
So here in the US, we focus on 15 to 39-year-olds. And that's really, when they're looking at research and they're looking at survival outcomes, that's where they're seeing that big gap in the middle. And we've seen some improvement, but we know that, over 80,000 people within that age range are getting diagnosed with cancer each year in the US. And so they're looking at the survival outcomes of that age group. And we're seeing huge advances in pediatrics. We're seeing huge advance in adults, but then there's this gap in the middle. And so that was really the pivotal moment when all of these researchers and doctors and healthcare providers came together to figure out why is there this gap, and they found some major issues, and so that's where these groups started popping up, to create initiatives to improve those numbers. So in Australia and the UK, the numbers may change a little bit, but it's really looking at that teenage, and into young adulthood, so up to 39.
So get
Focusing there.
getting into the gap and the major differences. It sounds like maybe it was a focus issue or resource issue in that case. But what was the research showing? What was lacking for that demographic in particular?
So I'm not a researcher or a scientist or a doctor, so I'll give you my best understanding of
Please,
it.
yeah.
And I think that there's really not one cause. I think it's a combination of things. I think that a lot of it comes down to research. So clinical trials, a lot of times the age cutoff is at 18,
Mm,
and then you have young adults that are getting pediatric cancers that are more common in pediatric patients. And then you're getting pediatric patients that are getting some young adult cancers, but they're getting treated on the pediatric side. So it's the lack of communication between the two. So you have adults that specialize in that type of treatment for that type of disease, that are treating a different type of cancer, if that makes sense. So,
sure.
so you have trained adult oncologists, that are now starting to see more pediatric cancers in their patients. And so changing the protocols, figuring out what the right protocol, the right treatment is for that patient, can be really challenging when there's limited research. And then when there's, the biology of our body is changing so much between a pediatric patient, adolescent, and then a young adult. And so really fine tuning the treatment to be perfect for that type of cancer and the biology of their body. And then going back to clinical trials, not only are there aren't a ton available for this age group. The other issue is with clinical trials, oftentimes they require more time spent in the hospital. They require more follow-up appointments, and it's just a lot of times more invasive. And a young adult is wanting to get back to their normal life. They want to be as independent as possible. They don't want to. So when they're given the option of doing a clinical trial or doing a different protocol that has been around, and that this one, one protocol offers more time at home and more freedom, they're going to choose that. And so it's really, I think some of the gaps in care are providing that age appropriate education, so that the young adult really understands their diagnosis and the best treatment for them. And then, I think one of the biggest pieces really is their unique psychosocial needs. And so this age group, you have some that at the beginning of, this AYA age, you have teenagers that are dealing with self-esteem issues and body issues, and their social groups are probably their number one focus at the time. They're preparing for college. And then you have, the college age, you have early careers and young families that are starting. And so you're really seeing some pivotal milestones within this age group, that a cancer diagnosis can really do a lot of damage
Mm,
for anyone at any
sure.
time. Cancer is always challenging. But for this unique age group, when they have some major milestones going on, it's, causing isolation. It's really affecting their mental health. They're there's a lot of regression. So a college student that's away at college and gets a cancer diagnosis, and they have to move home, and then they're being treated at a pediatric hospital where there's children all over the floor, and their nurse is talking to them like they're 3 years old. And then all of a sudden their caregiver, their mom or their dad, or an adult in their life is now sleeping in their room, which is very odd and not natural. And just having to make really difficult decisions at such a young age. So you see maturity and you see resilience, but you also see a lot of regression because they're losing that sense of autonomy and independence. And they just had all this freedom to be able to make their own choices, whether they were good or bad. They had that independence to be able to do that. And a lot of that's taken away when you're diagnosed with cancer and you're told you have to get up at this time, you have to take this medication. So long answer to that. There's a lot of reasons that that doctors and researchers are looking at for why that gap is happening. And that's really where Teen Cancer America is coming in to help hospitals, help health systems understand how to adapt their care for this age group. And that's clinically, that's psychosocially, their research. I could go on and on about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit more about the psychosocial things in a minute, but you seem really passionate about this space in particular. How did things get started for you? Where did you begin this journey or get exposed to this demographic and the tragedy that cancer can bring to them?
Mm-hmm. Kind of a twisty, turny journey to get there, but it's definitely landed me in a lifelong career and passion. So I experienced cancer in my own family. My mom had cancer and passed away when I was really young,
Mm.
and then some other family members had it as well. And so cancer was always a big part of my life, and particularly how it impacts a family, and how to have those tough conversations, how to help someone create a legacy, how to find normalcy, kind of that new normal, how to adapt when life just doesn't turn out the way that you thought it was going to go. And so some people, when you're impacted by cancer, you focus on research, or you focus on, fundraising or advocacy work. And really my focus was on the family and how this impacts the entire family, and grief and loss and all of that. And so I had a passion for working with children. I had a passion for education. I had an interest in the medical field. And so with that, someone along my college years came along and said, "Have you ever heard of child life?" Which I had never heard of. And I said, "No, but let me look into that." So I looked into it, and it literally combined all my three passions into
Mm.
one job. And it was just one of those magical moments. I was like, that is what I want to do. I want to help kids in a hospital understand why they're there and cope and find some normalcy and bring some comfort to the family. And so I applied for an internship at Chalk Children's in Orange County, and started working there. And during my internship, there weren't any job openings. And so I was getting so nervous as my internship was getting, closer to the end. I thought, oh man, like I'm going to have to move out of state. I really want to stay here. I love this hospital. I love what I'm doing. And probably about 2 weeks before my internship ended, my boss or internship coordinator called me in, and she said, "Okay, we really want to keep you. We don't have any openings right now, but we have this really random opening that we've never had before, and it's in oncology, and it's working with teens and young adults. It's a part-time position. We're kind of piloting it out. A donor is funding it." So she really, was talking it up. but basically saying, we don't know how it's going to go, but we want to keep you here. So just take it for the time being. And then when something else opens up, we'll get you in that spot. So I didn't even hesitate. And I said, yes, absolutely. I'll take it. I'll take anything. I was ready to start working in the kitchen, or doing whatever they needed me to do. So I started, and instantly, I just kind of fell in love with this age group. I had no idea what I was doing. I was trained to work with pediatric patients. I was trained to blow bubbles and do medical play and hold an iPad and use, adapt my language for a 3-year-old or a school age child. And there's really not a lot of focus in education on teens and young adults. And so I remember just having this list of patients, and I would go through, and anyone over the age of 14, I would highlight. And so, from 14 to 26-year-olds, I'd say, okay, I'm just going to walk in this room and hope that they like me. And so I would just go in there, and some were welcoming, and some, they had their lights off, they were under the covers. I knew they were awake, but they really didn't want to talk to me.
Mm.
And I didn't even really know where to start, other than I just want to listen. I just want them to talk to me. I want them to shed some light onto what this experience is like for them. And I want to learn. And I think that was quickly well received. I think that they knew I was going to keep coming around, even if they didn't talk to me, that I wasn't going to just stand at the door with a clipboard and ask if they needed any games or movies, or, if I could bring them anything. That I truly wanted to know who they were as a person.
Mm.
And so, for some, I had to really be patient and keep being persistent. But that is the message I want everyone working with young adults to know, that they're just as scared. They are in a space where we're invading into their privacy. They do not want to be there. They're not feeling well. They're stressed about how this impacts their family. And so, to get back to your question, I think spending that time pulling up a chair and sitting by their bedside and talking to them about normal life. Who are they dating? What are they watching on Netflix? What did they like to do before they were here? Who are they? They don't need to be this cancer patient when they talk to me. They can be, who they were before this.
Mm.
And I wanted to really understand where they were coming from, so that then my intervention would be, how do I bring that into this space? How do I maintain who that person is? Or if they're at a pivotal moment where they can change their future, and they can, I had a patient who loved to do graffiti. And he really opened up about that. And he was closed off for a long time. And he talked to me about, sneaking out in the middle of the night, and kind of his past before cancer. And obviously that was not an option for him when he was in the hospital. And so we found some other ways for him to still do his art. And I would put butcher paper up on the walls, and
Mm.
he would, decorate the inside of his room. Or I walked him out to the patio, and we had chalk. And so he would tag the outside, but in a appropriate way. And then he had art books, and then his art turned, from graffiti into cartoons. And that was a huge outlet for him. And then before long, he was, you know, creating artwork for every nurse, every doctor. I would see it up on their desks. And so he just I found out that was something that motivated him. And then towards the end of his treatment, we were able to start looking into art institutes and things that he never thought that he would be able to do. But I could come alongside him and remind him that this is a pause in his life, and this is a really hard thing that he's going through right now. But let's take the time to sit back and figure out what his passion is, and what the hope for his future is, and how can we work towards that rather than just thinking about all the things he can't do anymore. And so really that's what my day was spent doing, listening, and finding a way to intervene and remind them that they can still talk about who they have a crush on. They can still talk about, what they want to do for their future, and creating that within that space, whether it was music or sports or art, whatever that was. We just brought it into the hospital for them, and so I think it was through just these young adults that had so many walls up and so much fear, and stress and anxiety that they were facing. And then they let me into that. And then their walls came down. And that is an experience that I will never take for granted, that they trusted me, that they let me be a part of such a intimate, scary time in their life. And I took that very seriously. And then that quickly evolved into, oh my gosh, I was just in this room and they told me the same thing that they did in this room 2 doors down. If you could just meet each other, like if you could just know that you aren't alone, that there's 10 other people your age on this floor, that just told me the same thing. And so then that's when I became passionate about connecting young adults. And that kind of evolved from there.
Yeah,
So.
this program, I don't know where the program started whenever you came on board, but it sounds like it was very, very pilot program from the start, and it has transformed into something incredible. I was reading and watching some videos on the program, and I mean, you just a whole list of things. I don't know if these were all your ideas or who helped you with all these things, but it was. I'm reading here weekly social activities from movie nights to art classes, rock halls. You hosted a prom, you did an advisory board, leadership opportunities, peer support groups, college counseling, application assistance, weekend retreats, conferences. How did that evolve in from just hey, I'm going to sit by and listen and then find some creative ways to like a place where it seemed like a lot of both current patients and survivors came back, found their community, and honestly found a lot of fun and joy in some of these moments that you've created.
Yeah, you did your research. It's something that just brings me a lot of joy to talk about, and is a huge part of my life and my future. But like you said, I spent a lot of time at the bedside and hearing these stories, and it really was just this snowball effect that just kept evolving, and it turned into, I was starting out as a child life specialist. I was brand new. People didn't know who I was. But what I did have an impact on, or what I could control, was, I'm going to focus on these young adults. And if I can, my focus is on their development and normalizing this space for them, then I'm going to do just that. And I'm going to create social environments for them, because they're at an age where they should be socializing with their peers. They should be gaining independence. They should have more control and privacy and autonomy in their life. They should be working towards school and their career. And so if my focus is their development, then just like I would for a toddler that's learning to walk, and developing those milestones, I'm going to do that for a young adult. And so it started with walking around the unit. There was a program called Rock the Halls, and that had started just before I had started at Chalk. And really the mission behind it was to just try to get people out into the halls and not isolated to their nice private room, and meeting other people and kind of getting out of that hole, because it's very easy to regress and become depressed and kind of hide and hide out in your room when you're not feeling well. You don't want to be around people. And so I would knock on doors and I would drag them out of bed. Not necessarily physically, but I would be very persistent. And I would get them to walk with me, and I would just talk, and ask questions. And so before long, they would realize, oh, I just did 5 laps around the unit. And that was actually pretty fun. So then the next day I would do it again. And this time I'd say, oh, you know what? I have a friend in this room who needs to walk too. So let me just see if they want to come. So I'd knock on the door, and you have to be careful about HIPAA. So I would just, say, "Oh, we're doing some laps if you want to join us." And so that just continued to the point where we would have, 3 or 4 of the young adults from the unit walking lap after lap. Sometimes we'd play music, and sometimes we had themed events, to go along with the holidays throughout the year. We did a turkey trot, we did, different scavenger hunts, anything to motivate them to get out.
Mm.
And then that led to, "Oh, hey, you guys are all already out. Why don't we go to the teen room?" And so then we'd go to the teen room and we'd play ping pong, we'd watch movies. I would bring in food and we'd do little cooking classes. And I remember a pivotal moment. I was walking onto the floor and I look down the hall and I start seeing them knocking on each other's
Mm.
doors. And that was magic to me because
Ah,
that was when I realized, oh my gosh, they need to be together. It's not about, I'm not the funniest person. I didn't have any magical skills other than I was persistent and I really encouraged them to meet other people. But once you get them together, once you finally get them in the same room, that's when the magic happens because
mm.
they realize, "Oh my gosh, you get what I'm going through," or, "Oh, you had that same chemo," or, "Oh, you had that same surgery." And that goes even outside of the cancer world. When you connect with someone through a shared experience, there's a bond that happens. And these people, were coming from all different walks of life, very different backgrounds that probably never would have hung out if they were at high school together. And then they become best friends. And some of them were dating, some of them, are, going to be best friends for years to come because of that connection that is formed. And so, again, to answer your question, I think it started inpatient. And then I remember going to a conference and hearing some young adults speak about cancer does not end when treatment does. And one of the hardest and scariest parts of cancer is when you're done with treatment and your roadmap or the protocol that is laid out for you from your doctors, all of your appointments are lined up back to back. That ends and it starts to space out. You're not seeing your medical team as often as you would. And you're expected to go back to normal life, but there's no roadmap, or there's no toolkit on how to do that. And you're even more isolated. Or if your treatment's mostly outpatient, um, again, just as isolating, you're just at home. And so I became really passionate about, how can I bring all of these people together? And I remember people telling me, there's no way you're going to get these patients to come into the hospital when they don't need to be here for treatment. There's no way. So I remember I kind of closed that book for a little bit, but I remember thinking, no, like I really think this will work. And so the hospital was already doing a prom every year. Maybe 60 to 80 people would come each year. And it was in a wing of the hospital where they go for all their outpatient infusions. And so that was kind of one of my first tasks was to take on this prom. They're like, "Oh, now that you're working with young adults, you can take on the prom." And I was like, "Okay." So I pushed it. We went above and beyond. We did a lot of fundraising. We made a really big deal about it, and I think over the past few years, we now have 300 teens and young adults that come every single year. And it is a night that they look forward to. They get to get dressed up and feel good for one night. And again, it's about that community. And that is the key piece to all of this is, starting the advisory council or the leadership team. Um, Really giving them their voice back, giving them the opportunity to share what didn't go well during their experience and what did go well, and how can they make it better for the new patients that are coming in. And so I think the more I started seeing these connections being made, I just kind of pushed away a lot of the people that were saying no. And I said, we got to try it. Let's just try it. And if it fails, it fails, but at least I'll know and we'll try it. And so I learned a few things. I knew, it needed to be monthly because if you try to space it out too far, you lose those relationships. Um, and they kind of, if they miss a few of the events, then you're not building on that connection. And so the events needed to be monthly. I needed to mix them up, some on campus at the hospital and some off-site, because if they were on campus or they were on at the hospital, patients could come down from their hospital room, and then people could also come in from home. And so it gave them that opportunity. And then it was also just a safe space for us to normalize that environment for them too, that it doesn't have to just be treatment and hard stuff. It can also be a space where they feel comfortable and safe and can meet people their age. And then we did some things offsite as well, like sporting events and art classes um, and then that led to going to conferences. I really felt like now that they've built this connection with one another and they've met their peers, now they're ready to dive a little bit deeper. Now they're ready to talk about their cancer and late effects and how this impacts their experience. And so we had the opportunity to take them to some conferences. For young adults, and that was amazing, but it's limited to how many people you can take. So then I kind of thought, well, what about a weekend retreat, and we can adapt it and do something local. And so I don't know how I convinced administration to let me do this. I, I don't know. I think it's a combination of I'm very persistent, and I think I had to build trust from my leadership as well, but also I gave these young adults a platform to share their voice. And I think that these healthcare providers started to hear directly from these young adults that this is what they were needing.
Mm.
And so, yeah, we did a retreat 3 years in a row up in Lake Arrowhead, California. It was a 3-day retreat, and they got picked up from Chalk on a bus, and we went up and really just catered to what the group was needing to hear about, leadership skills, mentoring. How do you mentor another AYA that either had your same diagnosis or a different diagnosis, and how do you cope with that? How do you provide that support? We talked about survivorship. We talked about self-care, and how important that mindfulness and taking care of themselves first really is, and giving themselves some time and some grace after treatment to rehabilitate and to recover from the trauma that they've been through. We talked about PTSD, all sorts of things. To the point where this group really took their own leadership, and then they were kind of steering the events and coordinating what was to come, and we just listened. And I really think that that's what it comes down to, is listening to your patients, and giving them the opportunity to share, and that's really where the magic happens.
Yeah. I feel like we could probably talk forever. But as we conclude this conversation, I want to talk about Teen Cancer America. How did you get
Yeah.
involved in Teen Cancer America? And what are you guys currently doing to support hospitals?
Great question. So I joined Teen Cancer America about a year and a half ago, and there
What
was an
what what happened
opportunity.
there in terms of like you're doing incredible things at Chalk,
I
and I'm assuming
know.
they were probably sad to see you leave. What really lit you up about that opportunity with Teen Cancer America?
Yeah, probably one of the hardest decisions I've had to make, and still is challenging. Um, I think that I poured my heart and soul into this group of patients and what we were building at Chalk, an amazing team, amazing people, and it takes a toll on you. I lost a few patients that really was hard for me to
Mm.
cope with, and I think that, so part of it was some burnout, and needing a break from patient care. And then part of it was Teen Cancer America kind of snatched me up and offered me a position that I really felt like I couldn't turn down, and not because I was ready, to necessarily leave chalk. It was more an opportunity to see the bigger picture. So I had the opportunity to build something at Chalk, with an incredible team, with an incredible group of patients, and but it was very limited. So I only saw the pediatric side of AYA cancer care. And so with Teen Cancer America, I now am able to support the healthcare professionals that are doing the work that I was doing at Chalk and that are working directly with young adults all over the country. And so I knew one health system where there are so many different hospitals. There's adult hospitals, there's pediatric hospitals, there's community hospitals, there's large academic centers. There's all sorts of hospitals from coast to coast, and some don't have the same resources and the same support that I did at Chalk to build something. And there's still more work to be done. It's never completed. And so when they reached out and had an opening on their hospital programs and services team, I really couldn't turn it down. And it was hard to leave. And my heart is still with those patients and the team at Chalk. But they have a great team working there to keep it going, where other hospitals don't have the support and resources. And that's where Teen Cancer America can come in and really help them. So basically what my team does is we work with oncologists, we work with development teams, we work with nurses, child life specialists, social workers, psychologists, whoever it is at each hospital that has an interest in AYA. That's all we have to start with, is just that they know that this population is not getting the care that they deserve. And we work with them on a strategy. We walk them through a free consultation, thinking through fertility preservation, access to clinical trials. From the moment that that young adult walks into their hospital with a cancer diagnosis, who are they seeing? Who is talking to them? What types of services are available to them? So it's really this strategy document that turns into a business plan for a comprehensive adolescent and young adult program. And we're really looking at something that expands from pediatrics to adult, because these patients are falling into both. And so how do we get them to work together? You may have more psychosocial support at a pediatric hospital, but on the adult side, you have some clinical trials. And so how do you come together? How do you help them transition from a pediatric hospital to an adult hospital when the system is completely different? And so that has been kind of my new passion, is understanding these health systems all across the country, and how do you create change within them, which doesn't happen overnight. And how do I provide the same support that I did at the bedside to these social workers and child life specialists and nurses and doctors that are caring for these young adults in the most challenging time of their life. And now through Zoom and through the phone calls and unfortunately not in-person meetings at the time, but we'll get back to that. My team and I are able to provide that consultation. And so we now are supporting 42 AYA programs across the country. And we work with many, many, many more. I co-facilitate a call every month where we have a group of 150 healthcare providers, and that's not including the doctors, that are working on AYA program development. And so these professionals, these providers, are thinking about these things. They're thinking about, what does this young adult need in our hospital, and how do we create that change? And so through TCA, we're funding positions. We're funding AYA program managers and coordinators, dedicated AYA child life specialists, We're transforming spaces. So we're building teen rooms within hospitals. So again, you have this adult hospital that may look very sterile and there's a lot of older people, but then all of a sudden we put in this AY lounge where young adults know that there's a space for them in that hospital, or in a pediatric hospital where there's, bright colors and characters all over the walls, but then there's a young adult room that they can go and connect with their peers. And then they have a dedicated team that is providing this specialized care. So that's really what our mission is we want every AYA that's diagnosed with cancer in the US to receive age-appropriate specialized care at a comprehensive AYA program.
So, if people are bought in with that mission and want to support Teen Cancer America, where can people go to find more information?
So you can go to our website, teencanceramerica.org, and you can also visit us on Instagram, Facebook, we're on Twitter, and just look up Teen Cancer America. You can email me personally at kara@teencanceramerica.org.com. And I should look that up. And we'd love to get you more information to donate, to build a program at your facility. We've had young adults, we've had patients that have reached out to us to join our advisory council and said, I didn't have a program at my hospital. I really want them to have one. And they become the advocate. And we with their treatment team, their nurses and doctors, and it's through that young adult that wants to create change that we're able to help them build a program. So it's incredible work, and I'm incredibly privileged to be able to help so many people. And I'm proud of what Teen Cancer America is doing. I've seen firsthand the change that it's making and how it directly impacts this age group. And so I just can't wait for us to be in more hospitals.
And I will speak for the healthcare systems and the patients, the AY patients and them too. They are privileged to have you involved tackling this issue because you're a rock star. I totally buy into you. It's incredible all the things that you've done. I want to conclude this conversation with a question around support through your own experience with your mom, and then the experience that you've had with so many AYA patients. What does great support look like to you?
I think Be Present is getting it right. I think it really is about being present. And I remember early on in my career, wanting to say all the right things and wanting to fix it. And I quickly had to realize that wasn't possible, and it's not my role. But my role is to be there and to be present, and to, if it was standing outside the room and catching whoever was running out and needed a shoulder to cry on, or if it was, just listening and letting them vent, or letting them be angry, or, whatever that is. And not giving up after, being pushed away the first few times. I think just really being persistent and being willing to listen, and not making it about yourself. It's about them. And having conversations about video games was not something that I did often, but I knew that that's how I could show support and love to someone that was really passionate about that. So I think it's really about, putting that person first, being present, kind of giving up that control, like you're going to be the person that fixes everything, and just knowing that the best thing that you can do is, there's a Brene Brown video that I am obsessed with, and it's empathy versus sympathy. And that is to my core how I care for people, and what I think everyone should be reminded of. It's about being present. It's not about saying all the right things. It's kind of about being in the hole with that person, and letting them know that you're there, and you're going to be with them even when it's hard and tough and uncomfortable, and not just in the good moments, but in the hard ones too. And so these young adults have really impacted my life forever, and their resilience and their strength, and just their intelligence and maturity at such a young age inspires me. And our work isn't done until we give them the best care that they deserve.
Hmm. Well, that was beautiful, Kara. I have had a blast having the conversation with you and learning so much, being inspired by your story and everything that you're doing and Chalk is doing and Teen Cancer America is doing. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Justin. This has been a pleasure to meet you and to have this discussion.